What if the greatest threat to your company's growth isn't the market, but the untapped value sitting inside your people?
There's always value within every employee. From the moment that you're considering bringing them into the organization to the moment you're considering letting them go.
He's not here to optimize old systems. He designs frameworks that turn human capital into enterprise value. And as AI reshapes the world of work, one truth remains. Technology can't replace people unless leaders forget how to lead them.
AI is an enabler. It is not the foundational piece. And that's why a lot of organizations are jumping into this and finding some real challenges because they're thinking a tool will get them where they want to go.
From the boardroom to the executive assistant's desk, he's redefining performance, purpose, and partnership. Today, Joshua Washington reveals how to build companies where people and performance move as one. Welcome to Mastery Podcast, where entrepreneurs and experts uncover the truth about health, wealth, and personal mastery. I'm Dr. Sas. Get ready for powerful stories, expert insights, and transformational knowledge. Today, I'm joined by Joshua Washington, a faith-driven human capital strategist, organizational psychologist, and founder of Lee Malveaux, a firm dedicated to maximize the value within people. Joshua's work bridges human potential with the future of leadership. Welcome to Mastery Podcast, Joshua.
Well, thank you, Dr. Sass. So good to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. Great to have you here.
Absolutely. I'm excited to have this conversation with you. I think we're going to have a fun time today.
All right. All right. Let's dig into it now. Well, Joshua, you have said everything comes back to one word for you is value. Where did that begin for you?
Good question. Well, I'd have to take it all the way back to the high school version of me with a lot less grays. But I was, strangely enough, it came to me during a time where I was really into music. So growing up, I grew up in a small town in Florida called Southwest Florida called Immokalee. And I remember very vividly nights of being in my room and with my little Casio piano and writing songs like that's where communication mastery started for me in the form of writing songs. And I noticed something during that time. I would always try to like write a song that would have an impact on the person, that would help them kind of see themselves differently or see their situation differently. It wasn't just about like becoming some rock star. For me, it was really about the person. I didn't even really like singing. That's strange. That's the really strange part about it. It was about speaking to the person, really
Mhm.
extracting the value out of them and helping them to see themselves at a higher level. And that's really where it all started. When I left for college, my mom asked me, what do you want to do? I told her, Mom, all I know is this. I love people, right? And I love communicating, right? I love those two things together. And so as I dug more and more into that over the years, through those, developmental years that we all go through, that's when I discovered, all of this comes back to value. I believe that we all carry value within us. Some of us it's untapped. And that's just something that excites me to extract that value and help people to live to their potential.
Wow. That's pretty amazing because you realize that early on, a lot of people spend almost an entire lifetime before they figure out what they want to do.
Yeah.
And they realize it is the whole time what they love to do when they're a kid. And we were trained to not follow that instinct, right? And I'm glad you did.
You're right. I was blessed to figure some things out early. And one of the things I figured out is that we're going to spend on average about 90,000 hours working. About not so my thing was, hey, if I'm going to spend 90,000 hours working, I want it to be doing something that I feel fulfillment in, that I feel passionate about, and it actually helps people. And that's really what it boiled down for me.
Yeah, great, great. And I know when you started um your company, Lee Marvel, right? Did I say that correctly?
Yeah, you got it. It's Cajun, so it's a little tricky.
Yeah, it's Cajun, right? And Cajun come from French, and You know, French words are really tricky. Now, you talk about your grandmother with me before. You said she inspired you with that name. How does her legacy live on in your work today?
Well, yeah, that's actually a question I get often because when you look at the Lee Malveaux logo, you'll notice there's a vector of a woman's face in the logo. And
Mhm.
so when we first launched the firm, I would always get the question, Joshua, why is there a woman's face in your logo? Like I don't they try to be like polite about it. I don't wanna be weird, but you're not a woman. Why a woman's face in the logo? And the reason why is because it's my grandmother's maiden and married name put together, Lee Malvo. And so that vector is actually a picture of her face from her obituary. It was one of the last
Mhm.
pictures I had, and they had a picture of her as a young woman. And I took that picture with her little astute I love the astute, glasses she has on, and I just felt like, "Man, that'd be so great to make that a part of the logo, a part of the legacy," because she's one of the greatest leaders I've had the privilege of witnessing up close. This woman, I just saw her really lead in even some tough circumstances, just maintain her joy, maintain her faith, and, that just had a huge impression on me and my family. She was really the centerpiece of our family, and so the way to carry that legacy on was to start this firm, and I know a lot of people build businesses to sell them, and I believe in that. I think that's something that is, that's what business is all about, but this is definitely one of those businesses that I will never sell because it is a legacy piece. It draws back to generations and generations for me. So yeah, that's how that legacy lives on.
Wow, a really powerful story. And your grandmother, I'm sure she's looking down from heaven right now and said, "Where you go, Joshua? Thank you for uh, letting my legacy lives on." An amazing woman, I'm sure.
Yes.
And I know she is uh, a woman of faith, and you too, right? Learning from her, you are a man of faith. Now, how has faith shape the way you see people's God-given value in business?
Well, for me, it's everything. It's almost one of those things where I believe in my core that we all come from a creator, and that creator made us in his image, and his image is valuable, so therefore we are valuable. Right? And so I struggle to look at any human being and not feel like there's not some level of value within them that I can learn from or that can be extracted out of them, put in front of their face and help them go live a better life. And that's really where it comes from. I believe we're all God's children, so there's value in all of us. And that's how I like to view people, whether outside or inside business. I think this is a principle that's just for me, it's a core value, and that everyone has value. Everyone is meant to contribute something valuable to this world. And it's one of my personal missions to help people figure out what that is, whether it's in the business or whether it's in their personal life, and then go out and do that thing because we don't have a lot of time here. I think that the study was like over just over 4,100 weeks or something like that, like in that neighborhood of time that we have here on this earth. That's not a lot of time. So if we have that small amount of time, yeah, yeah, well, we have that small amount of time, we need to spend it making sure that we're
Yeah,
contributing the value that I believe God has placed in all of us.
yeah, absolutely. Super crucial, and I get it. We say it all the time. Time flies. Time
Mm,
flies, and I, with the work that I do too, we really look into why we do what we do, a mission, a vision, and the reason behind what we do. Right, like you say, we have that limited time on this earth, and so, with that said, you created some frameworks to support leaders to live with their values, with their strengths, with their God-given gifts, right? And you also have the strategic value founder. Now, can you elaborate on that a little bit? It's S.O.K.R.A.H, SOCRA.
mhm.
What problem does, that framework solve?
Well, that's a great question. So, I wanna bring it back like maybe 10,000 feet, and one of the things I discovered in my career is that frameworks when you have a framework, it tends to make complex issues simplified. It tends to simplify those complex issues. In fact, if you look at many of the college degrees or many of the specialized information within our society that allows people to progress faster, it's all built on frameworks. It's learning a frameworks are like the ingredients. And so as someone who is an organizational psychologist, we study the patterns in the market, right? And a lot of people oftentimes leave out the industrial part. The industrial part is really where a lot of the studying of patterns takes place. So as I begin to study patterns and what makes successful businesses, the old frameworks versus, the current reality of workforce and business and people and value, I begin to put together these frameworks. And the one that you mentioned, SOKRA, that one was actually put together to solve one of what I think is one of the major problems in business, which is taking the strategy from concept and great idea, great plan to execution. And that's that journey that so many organizations will either struggle to even put together a strategic plan, or if they do have a strategic plan, it's like Mike Tyson says, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. So they go out with their strategic plan, they're ready, they're excited, and then they start getting hit with all the realities of business and life and the unexpected things that like COVID that nobody saw coming. So SOKRA was really created to help organizations not only build and fortify strategic plans, but make sure those plans already have embedded in them a process and a journey of how to execute that plan. And it's agile enough that when things that are unexpected do happen, we can adjust, right? Because that's what business is all about. And really, that's what I believe this future, this new era we're in, it's going to be all about businesses who can be strategic and they can be quick. And I think in order to do that, you have to have a plan, a system, a framework that allows you to do that. So that's what SOKRA is all about.
Can you tell us what SOKRA stand for?
Yeah, yeah, it's really that's you know what I've worked with this so much that sometimes I forget that people have no idea what that means. So it's a great question, Dr. Sass. Well, we break it down this way. Every plan has to start off with sight. The S in SOKRA stands for sight, right? And that's the vision. Where do we want to be in 3 to 5 years? Right? What's that vision, that inspiring vision that your people can galvanize behind? I think when you look at Lee Malveaux, one of the terms or phrases you'll see is mission critical performance. Where the mission starts with the vision. We can't determine what the mission is if we don't have a strong vision. So that's what the S stands for. It breaks down that sight, and then the other aspect of that is the standard. All right, what is the standard that we want to stand for? Right, and standard it has to do with your core values. Or once you have a vision, you didn't have to figure out, okay, who are the people we will need to accomplish this vision, right? When the Marines or when they get together and they're going out on a mission, right? This Navy SEALs, when they're going out on a mission, it starts with getting the right caliber of people, right? Having a core value system helps you to attract and identify the people that are in alignment with the vision that you want to carry out. And then the other part of that S is we is the strategy, which is probably second on the list, but I skipped over it. So you have sight, strategy, and standards. And so the strategic piece is what are those 4 to 7 strategic priorities, right? We have our vision. So how does that vision now inform the strategic priorities that we want to go after uh, over the next 3 to 5, 10 years? So that's the S. And once you have those strategies in place, we move down to the O, which is objective, right? That's that first year. Let's take the big picture and now let's break it down into 1 year. So maybe that's taking a few of those strategic priorities and figuring out what the objective is for the year. Or maybe it's only focusing on one strategic priority. But whatever it is, we want to get it down to a year's time and figure out what is that objective. Make sure it's measurable. Make sure we can say at the end of the year, did we hit this or are we going to continue the journey towards this objective? And then once you have that in place, right, we have SO. Next is the KR piece, right? The key results. So your key results are that quarterly vision, right? This is how we break down that objective to make sure that we're managing it and monitoring it and executing on it. Every 90 days, we want to be looking at this. And then once you have that in place, your people know exactly the scoreboard, right? Are we winning? Or are we losing? Did we win this quarter or did we lose this quarter? Because just like most sports, every year has 4 quarters, right? And so we want to know, are we winning? Are we losing? And then from the key results, we go to key actions. And those key actions are just about that weekly, week to week. We're going to measure, how are we doing in executing those key results? Right. And some, not all organizations, but some go down to the KH, which is key habits. We don't do it with every organization, but some people need to get down to the daily. What do I need to be doing today to make progress towards? And you see how it layers so that by the end of the year, we can quantifiably measure. Actually, by the end of the week, we can quantifiably measure the progress that we're making on our overall strategic plan. So it just helps organizations execute on their plans and adjust their plans at a much more agile, higher
Mm.
velocity.
Yeah. So it seems like a very great tool. And can you share one story, Joshua? Like that you share with me a story about the physician program or that assistant who redesigned her own role. Can you share with us some of those story?
Yeah, absolutely. It all boils down to, well, with the strategy piece, right? I think we talked
Mhm.
about a story when I was working in one of the I worked for one of the largest healthcare organizations in the nation. And at that time, this thing came out that doctors just love. And I say that with every ounce of sarcasm. But this thing came out called patient satisfaction surveys. And doctors actually hated him. I mean, it was it took the doctors out of the center, and it really put the patient at the center, of the entire system. And I'm not here to argue whether that's right or wrong, but that's what happened. And so for me at that point in my career, that's really where this framework began to come to life because we had a really big problem. We had tools and resources that would help doctors, but we also had this stigma where doctors did not want to work with any of the administrators. Right? It was like, think medical group. They didn't wanna work with any of the administrators. So we had to get to the drawing board and say, "Okay, what's our vision?" Right? Let's start with the site. What is the vision? We need to help our doctors get their patient satisfaction scores up because there are financial implications to this. There are quality implications to this, right? So we have to figure out, okay, what's that vision? Okay, we wanna be here. All right, what are the strategic priorities? Well, we have to measure that. We wanna make sure that we're hitting this quality metric and this quality metric, right? And then that got down to, well, okay, what are the standards, right? What are the standards that we need in place? And that's culturally, like how our doctors need to be the leads when it comes to patient experience or patient satisfaction. So how do we build that culture? And you see, we're walking through S.O.K.R.A.H, right? So for me, the
Mhm.
biggest piece of the strategy was analyzing the current surveys. But when we analyze the current surveys, we realize 9 out of these 10 questions are not measuring the doctor's competence, which is where the biggest conflict was. The doctors felt like if you got a low score, that makes me appear like I'm not a competent doctor. But that wasn't the measurement at all. The measurement was your ability to communicate your competence. And once
Mhm.
we figured that out, it transformed our strategy. And so our objective became, all right, instead of approaching this the old way, we're going to go to our doctors and we're going to call it a case study because that's more appealing to the doctors. And from that point, we walked through the rest of the formula where we were able to go in, where I was able to go in and work with these doctors and get them to top quartile performance. And I'm thinking back, many of them were in 30 days or less. But the results were all because of walking through this framework where we were able to, on a month to month, week to week, be able to now measure this because we had the right strategy. Everyone's used to these, checking these things weekly or checking them quarterly, but none of that matters if you don't start with the right strategy. And so that's kind of an example of how all of it has to be brought together in order for it to truly be an effective framework and get, successful results.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to look at the people in the system, right? And not just the number itself. And
Right.
and you really demystify what really was going on there. It's not measuring. how they can be the best employee or the best physician, but it's the communication part that was missing.
Right. And that's usually, I can tell you, Dr. Sass, 99% of the companies I go into, that
Mhm,
is the issue. It is a communication issue. And that's really a strategic plan is really it's meant to be, hey, we got this good idea. How do we communicate it to the rest of the organization so that everybody, it's like a football team or sports,
mhm.
right? It's not very many, it's not like rocket science to figure out what creates championship teams, but communicating that and executing that is where the rubber meets the road. And so,
Mhm.
to your point, it wasn't about the numbers or the scores. It was about getting to the heart of the people. And then that required a strategic communication approach.
Now, with that said, how can you communicate that to the leaders because they're the one who making this decision, right? And the leaders are the one who often underestimate the human capital, right? The people in the workforce. What's the real financial and cultural risk of that blind spot from the leaders?
Wow. Well, think about it this way. What's the we could ask the opposite question, and I think that answers it. What's the highest expense on most organizations, you know, expense sheet? It's usually the workforce. It's usually the people. And so if you don't get that part right, your biggest expense can become your biggest loss. And I think that is the quantifiable element there. I think where a lot of leaders struggle is this stuff can become very much like conceptual or like intangibles, and that's not it at all. You can measure this stuff. This stuff is scientific. You can actually make quantifiable measurements and predictability in how you maximize the value within your people. And I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions or myths that a lot of executive leaders have is that, oh, we just need to be nice to our people or give them a good benefits a package or give them a day off here, a day off there. And really, none of those things historically from the research are like really big pushers for outcomes of productivity and higher performance. It can be a part of the pie, but it's usually a small piece of that pie. So I think that piece is one that organizations who put more intention into that and making sure that they're looking at their workforce from a scientific lens and performance lens tend to have greater returns.
Yeah, and you work with all levels, right? That you work with leaders, you work with manager, you go all the way down to the worker bees, and it all speaks the same language. It's like what is the maximum value you can get from the human capital and that goes into what they love to do
Right.
and we had that conversation where you can support leaders in finding that out within themselves and within the all the different level of leadership and you can actually maximize the whole system of the company.
Yeah, and that's something we call our strategic value finder. So the idea was for decades, maybe even centuries, we've seen in business where oftentimes companies will build the people around the work, meaning
Mm,
these are jobs, these are things, tasks, projects we need to get done. Let's hire people to do said projects or tasks. Well, that worked for a while, right? But the higher return is when you can actually build the work around the people, meaning you understand what their strategic gifts are, their strategic value is to the business, and then you align them with that work. Because all work goes through three arenas. Like if I'm talking to an executive, this is kind of the conversation we have. We break down all work into three arenas. The first one is strategic foresight, right? You got to have the vision to be able to see what's coming, what are the threats? What are the big solutions? What are the needs? What solutions do we need to create? Right? It's all strategic foresight in that first arena. The second arena is strategic alignment. Right? Once we know what's coming or what we need to do, you got to get it off the ground. You got to initiate it. We all have to be aligned to get that done. We have to value extract. And then the last one is strategic execution. So those are the three arenas that all work kind of it flows through those three arenas. And what I encourage organizations to do is figure out which arena, the work, project, task that you're doing, which arena is it in? Because I guarantee you there are people in your organization that have strategic gifts that they are innately designed to do that work at a high level and do it at a higher productivity. And so that's the taking that into a real life scenario. That's building the work around the people. You put your people in the right seats, make sure they have the right work, and they will produce the right outcomes that will help you succeed.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, I've been in different organizations before where it's just like a revolving doors. And it's not that it's not the right people that they have. They have great people, but it's the environment that they must create, right, for their people. Um, with that said, it come with a lot of costs if you don't maximize what you have already, human resources and all this stuff. It is like when you hire someone, there's training. When you let go of someone, then there's a loss of many years of trainings, right?
Yeah. Yeah. There's an
Yeah.
ongoing joke I have with some of the CEOs that I've worked with. Anytime in our first conversations, I always tell them, "Hey, don't get sticker shock because I'm a very expensive, I'm a very expensive line on your sheet." But when we get into the conversation about their turnover,
Mhm.
they realize I'm actually pretty cheap compared to what they're losing in that revolving door that you're talking about. And so many organizations are not seeing the hidden cost and loss that's happening
Mhm.
daily, even from employees who are not necessarily leaving your organization, but maybe they're on the clock and their productivity, what they're actually putting out versus what you're paying them is
Mhm.
costing you major. And oftentimes it's not always that, oh, this employee is lazy. Oftentimes from what we've seen, it's that they're not in the right seat and they're not doing the right work. And when we can break free from some of those sacred cows where it's this
Mhm.
is your job description, you only can do this. And we're seeing a lot of businesses start to do this, where they're treating it more like I think about I watch sports when I can, but I think about like the NFL and an offensive line. Years ago, when there was no salary cap, which for us in business, it'd be like a budget. When there was no budget,
Mm.
NFL teams could hire, they could bring in as many players as they wanted. They could hire the best, right? They could just pay for the best talent. But what happened was once there was a cap and they could only go to a certain extent with their pocketbooks, that forced them to get way more strategic. And one of the things you begin to see is every offensive line has like five guys. But what they would start to do is the guys who could do multiple positions became higher valued, right? You either had to be the very best at your position or you had to be able to do two or three positions if you want to guarantee your spot on the team. And I think that's a great kind of analogy of where the workforce is moving, where a lot of employees are going to be asked to be able to do two or three different things because maybe we have a project on our list that's has a great return for our organization and we need more hands on deck. So it's not about your job description at that point. It's about does your gift help us execute this at a high level faster? And that's how a lot of the work and work groups will be designed.
And you also mentioned something about your work with, assistants to the
Mhm.
executives, and you had this work that you do is called EA Pro?
Right. Yeah, EA Pros is actually it's a division that we made underneath the firm to really redesign the assistant role for the future. And when I tell you, Dr. Sass, this was not on the bingo card. Like this was not something that I expected to be doing, but I'm so glad that we are doing this work. In fact, I got invited to speak at a conference, and most sometimes if you're a speaker or keynoter, you know how this goes. Sometimes you get invited to things and you're not even sure what it is. 'Cause they tell you, hey, this is a big event. We want you there. So it's like, all right. But as I got closer, I started to realize, wait, what is this again? Because I didn't know that assistants were gathering in this, at this, no, I think it was about over 2,500 assistants in one conference, one room. So I was very intrigued, and they asked me to go there and speak to this room about executive leadership, knowing that I had worked with executives and doctors. So we went there, had a fantastic session. And then they made the mistake of offering this country boy a free meal. So afterwards, so I said, you know what, I'll hang around for dinner since it was in my city. And as I'm there at dinner, I'm being approached by all these assistants, and it started to become like this coaching session as they were telling me all the things going on in their world. Because I can't help myself but try to add value. But I began to notice something, which was like, man, a lot of these resources or the challenges that they're having, the solutions are some of the same things I'm working with their executives. What this information
Mm.
isn't getting down to them. And as we began to research and study, we found out exactly why that is. I left that dining hall that night, and I remember going through the lobby and asking myself, this is how it starts with visionaries. Start asking myself, what would happen if we gave them the same tools, right? The same tools that our firm has been giving executives and helping them and their organization succeed. What if we gave them the same tools? And from that point on, we said, let's go test it. So we started talking to the assistants, doing our research on not just the assistants, but the executive leaders and the market. And we realized this is a profession that for 100 years has changed in function, but not identity. And there's a danger in that, especially now that there's this market catalyst called AI on the picture, and it's a direct threat to their profession. So, me as someone who loves a great underdog, we said, "You know what? Let's see if we can help." There's no one else in this profession or industry that's offering what we wanna offer. So, we put together an executive kind of coaching mini practice for assistants, and we really just wanted to test what the results would be. And when I tell you our first few cohorts we've seen, 95% of the assistants who come through our programs have 95% have either got a larger salary increase or promotion or change their title to something that is more tailored to their value in the business. You see
Yeah.
there's a correlation here and their value to the company and the bottom line, which gives them more security. All right. So we've seen and how we can, through this framework, be able to transform the identity to what we now call the strategic assistant. And so we wrote that book called The Strategic Assistant to help assistants now navigate that journey from becoming in the old era of what was like secretary, admin, EA, now this new era, which is the strategic assistant, which is an identity, not a title, not a job title, but an identity that will help assistants be able to really maximize their value within the business and help businesses really maximize their success.
Yeah, and I have the experience with having assistant too, and they all are not the same. You have one of those who are just they just do the task. That's it. And there are people who think strategically and they actually reduce the time that you need to work. So you save the leadership time when you have the strategic assistant and you have programs to help assistants do that.
Yeah, absolutely. We use some of the same tools like this, like we will talk about the strategic value finder.
Mhm.
We use some of those same tools where we help them identify their strategic gift in the business. And it makes the world of difference. We had one
Mhm.
assistant, I'll tell you real quick, who came to us. She wanted to be chief of staff. Because that's what they're told. Their career journey is, after an EA, the next step is chief of staff, and nothing wrong with being a chief of staff, but I think that's very limiting if that's your only route in your career. So I told her, "Come see us." I doubt that's the only option for you. So she came, she went through our program, and by week 2, 2 out of 12, she was like, "Oh my gosh, I now know exactly what I want to do and how I can best contribute to this organization." And it's because she discovered her top 2 strategic gifts in the business, and it wasn't in alignment with what that chief of staff role would be. And so now she's the director of executive office and board affairs, which is her own unique kind of standpoint within the organization that gives her a stronger positioning, right? A stronger value so that she didn't have to worry about a lot of these layoffs that we're seeing sweeping across this profession. And I think that's why this is a critical moment for assistants. There will be about 70% who will be subjected and succumb to the transition and all of these layoffs and the stagnation of earning potential. But then it'll be about 30% who will realize the moment, recognize the opportunity, and say, I'm going to become a strategic assistant and I'm going to open up my career to a new kind of field, a new open pasture of opportunities. And we want to be kind of just the main players in being able to help assistants accomplish that.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you for that story, Joshua. And this message is for leaders as well as assistant because we can maximize both leadership's time and the assistant role, right? Um,
Absolutely.
Now let's talk about the elephant in the room. And we want to maximize our workforce, and now everybody's afraid that AI gonna replace their job. And you've been developing the AI strategy, right? Can you just touch base on that a little bit?
Well, yeah, AI is it's so new that all the conversations are still so wide and far reaching. But I love it. I think everyone's trying to figure this out together. But I would encourage everyone to remember that the marketplace moves in patterns. So AI is a fantastic, element that's been added to business. But it's I like to think of it like a car, right? So we created an approach called the teaspoon approach to AI strategy, and it really boils down it's TSP. That's why we call it the teaspoon approach. It's technology, systems, people. That's really going those fundamentals are not gonna change. And think of it kinda like a car. When it comes to a car, if you don't have people to drive the car, then the value of the car means nothing. Alright.
Mhm,
So you need the people first. You always have to start with the people. The systems are like the engine, right? If you have a person that jumps into a car, but there's no engine, we're not going anywhere, right? The business is not going anywhere if you don't have the systems in the business. The systems are the engine. And then the technology, once you have the people, the systems like the engine, then the technology is like that's what separates from like your poor dunk car, your old beat up car from your luxury vehicle. It's all based on the technology on the inside of the car. And that's what AI is. AI is an enabler. It is not the foundational piece. And that's why a lot of organizations are jumping into this and finding some real challenges because they're thinking a tool will get them where they want to go. When the truth
mhm.
is, you have to have a more holistic approach. And so we're really trying to help organizations on the strategy side of being able to strategically think about AI holistically. Think about not just the technology, but your systems, not just your systems, but your people. And when you have a more well-rounded approach like that in your AI strategy, you're going to exponentially increase your chances of success and scale.
I love that. I never heard anybody said the holistic approach to AI before, and I'm a health nut, so I mean, I'm comparing that to health, right? If you have looking at every part of your health, then the same thing. The AI approach is part of the health of your business, and you need to use that tool in a way that maximize your output, and I love it. Can't wait to hear more about that system. I know you're gonna be using it more and more in the near future.
Yes.
Now, you also said the future workplace will personalize work the way Netflix, right, personalize content, and I remember that, and I was thinking about it, I was like, "Yeah, that makes sense." If you watch those Netflix, series, it's like you get hooked, and how did that happen? How do you, correlate that Netflix with the future of the workplace?
Well, everything in our world right now is becoming more personalized, right? And
Mhm,
and I our vision is to help bring an element of that into the business where it's personalized to the strategic value of the workforce. So there's 6 archetypes. We keep talking about strategic value. I want to make sure everybody
mhm,
listening fully understands what we're talking about here. So the strategic value finder breaks it into 6 archetypes, and it's 2 per arena, right? So when we look at the strategic foresight arena, you have that's where your visionary scouts and your creative catalysts live. When we think about the strategic alignment arena, that's where your action drivers and your value extractors will live. Then we think about the strategic execution arena. That's where your results champions and your operational architects are going to live. And so think of your people like chess, like a game of chess, right? What is the likelihood that you would win a game of chess if you didn't know what moves each piece could make?
mhm.
Right? When you break it down that way, it simplifies it. So think about how many organizations hire people and they hire them to a specific job description, but you're trying to get a pawn to do what the knight is supposed to do. And so that's the personalization piece. It's like figuring out who are your pawns, who are your knights, and what is the work that best matches their strategic value. And when you know who your piece, you know what your pieces are, you're set up to play the game of chess while everybody else is playing checkers. And that's where businesses want to be in the marketplace. That's the innovative, forward kind of positioning that businesses want to be in. So that's what I mean when I talk about the personalization piece. I envision where organizations have full blown profiles on each one of their employees, and they can go and look and say, okay, that's what makes this employee valuable. Hey, we know what the top 2% of our workforce is, connected to the bottom line of the business and who's producing, the revenue. So that's really the personalization side for the business. I think for the employee, just being able to show up and do work that gives you energy, that
Mm-hmm.
keeps your cup of energy filled, because that's what happens when we're operating within our strategic gift. Like, I'm a visionary scout, so anytime I get a chance to do that kind of work, I light up. My brain lights up, and so that's the other side of the personalization. That's what Netflix and all these other, all the social media, that's what they figured out. It's the dopamine rush, and so that's why when you watch that show that you love, you don't even get a chance to pick the next show. They say in 10 seconds, we're gonna give you something similar just like that. Right? So imagine someone's work task list that works like that. Or you just finished this thing that's in your strategic gift. Now in 10 seconds, here's the next project that's just like that one, to keep that dopamine, keep that energy and fulfillment at a high level. I think that's where you can create winning organizations and winning teams that everybody wants to be a part of.
Yeah, personalized workplace, and you just can't wait to get up and go to work, right?
Yes,
That's amazing. And if we can solve that problem, it's a win-win for the organization and the individual working in the organization.
absolutely.
Let's go back to AI a little bit. How does that how does AI becomes an extension of your philosophy of maximizing value and not a replacement of it?
That's a good question. To put it simple, AI is the enabler. AI is the multiplier of value, right? And then when we look at it that way, it's impossible for it to replace people. Now, what it will replace is certain tasks, especially the reactionary ones in business. So, what I've been encouraging professionals on the professional side is to make sure that you are increasing your strategic abilities, because that's going to be the name of the game. I've always told people the name of the game in business is value, right? But part of how you're going to distribute or contribute your value in this new era is going to be those who understand the strategic aspect of the business. And so, what is the strategic aspect of business? Think about those three work arenas that we've been talking about. All three of those arenas are strategic arenas of work. The best way as a professional that you can really increase your value is by understanding what's your arena. Like, I know for me,
Mhm.
strategic foresight and strategic alignment, that's where, my top 2 gifts sit. Where do yours sit? Because once you know what arena that you really thrive in, then you wanna look at what are the top AI tools in that arena, because those are the AI tools that are going to multiply your value, right? And so that's how we can turn something like AI into a tremendous asset. I think this is the greatest time in history to be in business. This is the greatest time in history to be a professional, right? But
Right.
it all depends on your approach, your strategic approach to this new era. If you are afraid that it's gonna replace you, then I can guarantee you it's probably gonna replace you, because you're standing still. You're not developing the strategic muscles and awareness that it's gonna take in the new age or the new era that we're moving into quickly. But if you are engaged into this and you're doing the work, I think every professional should be looking how they can reinvent themselves right now, or take their profession to the next level personally. I think if we do
Mhm.
that, that can subside those fears, and we can focus on using AI for what it was intended to be used as, which is an enabler and a multiplier in the business world.
I agree with you 100%. You use that as a tool, and I like the word that you use, an enabler and a multiplier. Instead of being at this level at your professional skills, you're actually taking your skills up to the next level because you have this greatest tool, right? It just like having an internet, having Google Sheet
Yep.
and Microsoft, and instead of sitting there on an old typewriter. You have you
Yeah.
have this amazing tool that you can use instead of spending hours researching. You're like, "Hey, AI, research this for me."
Yeah.
And, yeah, you become next level. Now, with your belief system and, the framework that you created, you've said you want to make organizational psychology a boardroom advantage. Now, how will that change leadership in the next decade?
When I think of that, I think of Michael Jordan, which many of us are familiar with Michael Jordan, the NBA player. Many folks talk about how his career changed when this coach named Phil Jackson stepped into the scene and how it really took his career to the next level. And I look at that as the strategic element. Like Phil Jackson had a different strategy than every other coach of working with Michael Jordan and was able to extract the highest value out of him and his career and that team. And that's why Phil Jackson has become one of the, greats or one of the legends in that game. Well, I look at organizational psychology as in the same sense. While not every organizational
Mhm,
psychologist is created equally, but the work that I can speak to our firm specifically, that's how we see ourselves. We want to be the Phil Jacksons, the strategists who walk into the boardroom and are a competitive advantage for our clients. And that's what I mean when I talk about being a competitive advantage, because I think the competitive advantage in the marketplace, especially when it
mhm,
comes to your workforce, is going to be strategy. Who are the organizations that are thinking differently? They're not tied to the sacred cows of how we've always done work, how we've always written
mhm,
job descriptions, but they are decentralizing their organization and they are empowering their people, but they're equipping their people to do their best work. And when you do that, uh, the sky's the limit of some of the innovations, the speed, the decision velocity, right? The way that you can pivot and respond to your customers, right? There's so much great things there, but it all starts with at that top level, the boardroom of the strategy. If you have the wrong strategy, for instance, if you put a ladder against the wrong house, it doesn't matter that you climbed the whole ladder and got to the top of the house. That's what
yeah.
strategy is. It's making sure that ladder's against the right house and we're climbing in the right direction towards the right goal.
Absolutely. Wow. Wow. You're just a wealth of knowledge. And let's bring this home a little bit. And when you talk about leadership, talk about workplace and all this stuff, we all bring that home with us. And whatever is going on at home, we bring that to
Yeah,
work. And
absolutely.
when you talk about multiplying God-given value in your family, and what does that look like, in a home and in building legacy way beyond, um, today?
Well, that's probably my favorite question because I have a 5-year-old and it's a little more it's deeper for me. Like it's a lot more profound for me because I never like I've never known my biological father. So when I think about my son and he gets to know his father, my goal has always been to build 3 generations deep. Like that's the legacy goal. We're not just talking about money, we're talking about values, we're talking about, you know, character, all those things. And so when we talk about multiplication or maximizing value, that's my first and greatest assignment is like with my son and with my home. And like that is where it all kind of where the rubber meets the road. That's where my greatest lessons come from and some of my greatest failures come from, right? And which makes me better in every other area of life, every aspect of life. So that to me is very personal because when I look at my son, there are things that I'm teaching him and he's teaching me that will go on for generations and generations. And so it's helping him discover the same things. What are his God-given strategic gifts? What's his God-given value and how to, support him in developing that, putting him in positions to develop that and equipping him for the future so that he can get out into this world and pour out his value. The value is not meant to be hoarded and kept for self. What makes the value so valuable is that we get to go out and distribute it to others. And that's really the mindset and perspective that I try to give to my son is based on our faith. That's what we believe in. And that's why it's so important to develop that value so that you can then go out and pour it out into others and have them pour theirs out into you. Because if we're all made in what I believe is the image of God, then that means we all carry a piece of God. And so when we come together, that's when we get the big picture. That's when we get the full picture of who he is. And that's what's so special. That's why we can never diminish one person within that whole, because that one person, they may be the aspect of the eye, the little piece that makes the whole picture come together.
Right. Well said, Joshua. I'm sure your boy listening to this, he just so proud of his dad, and I'm sure he's a wonderful father. And we mentioned that before. I was like, I'm just so happy for your boy.
Right.
And with that said, coming to a close, what would be the last word you want to give advice to leader to uh, just people out there in the organization? What's the one thing that they can do today to change their environment, their workplace, their leadership to the next level?
I think on the practical side, I would encourage every leader to start thinking about how are they building the work around their people. I think that's going to be a critical element as we move forward into the future. It's going to help you be able to utilize and leverage things like AI at a much higher level if you are looking at your organization that way. And I think there are a lot of organizations that are still centralized in their structure that need to think about how to become more decentralized. And that may work in the army, right? But it doesn't work in most businesses because you're dealing with human beings, and you know about the services because you were in I believe the Air Force, right? So you know all about that.
Yeah, but still, those are human being too.
Yeah, yeah, they are, but it's a little harder to do decentralization in war. But in this case of business, uh, it's important to leverage,
Mhm.
right? Leverage that individual value in a different way. So that's one element that I would encourage. And then the value piece, I think just always there's always value within every employee, right? And so from the moment that you're considering bringing them into the organization to the moment you're considering letting them go, always keep that in mind. Always keep in mind, what is their value? Because then you can say for sure whether that value fits within your business. But if you don't know what their value is and you're letting them go, then that honestly oftentimes is more of an indictment on the organization and the leadership than it is on the
Mm.
actual person. So those are two things that really come to mind.
Wow, powerful. What's the value in the employee before you let them go? And the other thing is, there are two things: building
Well,
the work around your people and find the value within them before you let them go.
yes, you do those two things, you will set yourself up to succeed in many ways, especially when it comes to being able to save costs, right, on the turnover, right,
Mm,
and having higher retention so that you can use that money to actually pour back into your people, be able to do things for like it's an ecosystem. So yes, that's absolutely what I would, if you wanted to have some quick wins, those are two things that you could do.
great, great. Thank you so much, Joshua, for those advice and for this great conversation. It's been incredible. And a true visionary, Joshua. You are a true visionary, helping leaders maximize value within their people and navigate the future with purpose, system, and faith. And I love our conversation and love the conversation around the AI and how they may change the work and how we can embrace them. Right? It's never the workplace. It's never the human. It's how we embrace the tool and that is given to us. And all the listener out there and all the audience out there, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to like, comment, and share, and follow the Mastery Podcast for more inspiring conversation with impact-driven entrepreneurs and leaders. Until next time, keep mastering your health, wealth, and inner self, because how you lead yourself is how you lead everything. Thank you, Joshua.
Thank you for having me.
Bye for now.